Hello, hi, hey, my name is Michaela Ray, and today we are coming at you again with another video. And I don't have makeup on in the rest of this video. I just realized when I was going to edit that I somehow didn't do an intro for this. So that's what this is. This is the intro for this video. So today we are going to be doing episode 2 of Murders and Makeup, and we are going to be discussing Gordon Northcott today. So yeah, if you guys are interested in Gordon Northcott or murders or true crime, like me, then please just keep on watching this video. Also, there is no makeup involved in this video because it was really late when I was filming it and I didn't feel like removing all of the makeup, and I had like 6 pages of notes to read. So excuse the fact that there's no actual makeup in that video or me doing my makeup, whatever. If you guys like that way better, then just let me know in the comments. So yeah, thank you guys so much, and if you're interested, just keep on watching. Okay, we are gonna try this again. This is the 3rd time I'm trying to film this, and I'm just getting really frustrated at this point because they're yelling at Fortnite. It's fun time. I love living with gamers. It's never peaceful. So we're gonna start off with just a little bit about Gordon. And yeah, so let's go. Gordon Northcott was born in Canada. He was born specifically in Bladworth, Canada in 1908. He was raised in British Columbia, which is actually still part of Canada for those of you who don't or aren't very familiar with it. His mother was Sarah Louise Northcott, and his nephew was Sanford Clark. These people are really important and instrumental for what happens later on. Now, living in the United States, there's a running joke about Canadians, and it's that they're really nice most of the time. So to me, it's kind of funny that somebody from Canada did something so bad, because they are not known for that here. It's not a thing. It's like, we don't hear a lot about what happens in Canada because, like, I don't live very far from there. I live probably 5 or 6 hours from the Canadian border, so I don't live very far from there. Sometimes we hear their news and sometimes we don't, but more often than not, we don't hear anything, and normally it's nothing bad even if we do. So it's kind of funny that this is such a bad thing that happened. Like, this would put a damper on Canadian history because he was a nasty dude. Like, there's a lot of messed up stuff happening on here. So yeah, I just wanted to like throw that in there a little bit. It's just a joke. It's a really bad joke. It's not funny, but it is what it is. So let's go on to Gordon's childhood. Now, there's not tons and tons of information about Gordon's childhood, but I'll give you what I got. So the consensus is that he was sexually abused and beaten as a child, most likely around the age of 10. Now, most sexual abuse that happens does tend to happen to children just because they're very impressionable. They don't necessarily know that there's something bad, like there's no quotes around it, like there's something bad happening to them. Like, they don't maybe necessarily realize this to the full capacity that they should. Children don't tend to be as educated about sexual abuse and physical abuse and like what those things are, because it's a really hard topic to talk about with kids, you know. It's really hard to try and have like the sex talk or something like that with like a 9, a 10-year-old, 11-year-old even, because they're still too young, even at like 11 or 12 in my opinion, to completely understand like what is actually happening to them. So this is just really disappointing that this happened to him, and it's really instrumental in why he did what he did. But here's something really confusing for you guys, and it took me a little bit of time to try and make sense out of it, and hopefully I made this clear enough for you guys to understand as well, because it took me about probably 30 minutes to write this bit because it was so hard to understand, and the way that it was written in all the articles that I looked at. So his mother in most documents is Sarah Louise Northcott. She claimed in 1929, though, that she was actually his grandmother, and his mother was actually his sister, Winifred, after she was raped by her father. If I'm not wrong, his father's name is Cyrus. I will correct myself on the screen if I am incorrect. And that resulted in a pregnancy. So essentially, dude raped his daughter, and then Gordon was the product. Gordon also claimed that he had an incestuous relationship with Sarah and that he was molested by his father. So he was claiming that Sarah was not only claiming that Gordon was her grandson, but she was also supposedly having incestuous relations. But because, like, it's just really confusing, so we're just going to continue. So basically, if these claims are true, that would mean that Sarah was his grandmother, Winifred was his mother, making his father also his grandfather, and was raised as Sarah's son. So then Winifred had Sanford, his nephew / brother, and they also had a sister named Jessie, who's kind of just like a catalyst in this situation. To me, that's kind of confusing. So Sarah is his mother / sister. Winifred is his sister / mother, and Sarah is technically Gordon's grandmother / lover, which means his father is also his grandfather. And then his sister had other kids, Sanford, who makes it his nephew / brother. It's really just, it's kind of weird. So yeah, onward we go. So Northcott later in 1924 moved to Los Angeles, California. And Northcott convinced his father to buy a plot of land so he could have a chicken farm in Wineville, California, currently known as Mere Loma, which is View of the Hills in Spanish, or View from the Hills in Spanish, I'm sorry. The plot of land was used to farm chicken and house his father's construction business and his nephew, Sanford Clark, who was 15. Sanford came to the farm under the guise that he was going to help do labor, and he traveled from Canada to California with his parents' permission. So basically what happened was Gordon talked to Sanford's parents, Winifred and his father, and basically said, hey, can I use Sanford to come help me do labor on the farm? And they were like, sure, and they let him go to California at 15. So we're just kind of gonna jump right into the murders because there's not like a ton of information on the actual murders. So the murders were committed from around March 10th of 1928 to January 11th of 1929. There was a total of 4 confirmed and 1 speculated, but potentially over 20 boys were murdered at the Wineville Ranch. They only found 4 bodies, and all. They didn't even find 4. They technically found 3. One of them was from a different murder, speculated to be the first one, which we're going to talk about that a little bit right now. So the known victims are Walter Collins, Lewis and Nelson Winslow, and an unidentified boy known as the Headless Mexican, who Gordon said was named Alvin Garcia. Alvin Garcia was murdered in La Puente, but was not part of the chicken coop murders, but was one of his first ones. So there's not a ton of information on Alvin Garcia, and there's no confirmation as to whether or not it actually was Alvin Garcia that Gordon had murdered. It kind of just was like a name he threw out, but that's the consensus, is that it was Alvin who he killed first. Walter, Lewis, and Nelson all endured sexual abuse, physical abuse, hard working condition on Northcott's farm. And when they were like worn out and scared, he would take them to the chicken coop to see the baby chickens, and he would then kill them with the blunt side of an axe. So it wasn't like he was using the blade, he was using like the handle or the back of the blade, because the blade is attached to the handle, so the blade is stable, so he could have easily just like swung the back side of the blade and hit them in the head or body or whatever. The bodies were never fully recovered at the site after the boys were murdered. They were dipped in quicklime, which, for those of you guys who don't know what quicklime is, it's a type of acid, and it erodes things really quickly, and it decays, and it helps with the decaying of human bodies quicker. So essentially, over a period of time after you dip them in quicklime, it destroys like all the evidence. They were buried on the property by the chicken coop. Sarah, Gordon, and Sanford were all involved with these murders. I need to get a drink. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. I had to get some water. I have bad vocal cords, so when I talk for too long, my throat starts hurting really bad and I can't talk. So we're just going to continue, and we're going to talk about his arrest. So what led to his arrest were a series of rather interesting events. Sanford was in communication with his, I guess it would be aunt. It was Gordon's sister, Jessie. So his aunt, Jessie, who was worried about Sanford as he had told her he was afraid for his life in their correspondence. She flew out to Wineville to see Sanford and check on him. While she was there, Sanford admitted while Northcott was asleep that 4 boys had been killed on the ranch, which was actually only 3. About a week later, Jessie returned to Canada. When she returned, she went to the American consul and told them of Northcott's crimes. So she went to what would essentially be the United States Embassy and talked to them, and basically said like, hey, this is what's going on, like this is weird, can you guys check this out? When she returned, she went to the consul. The consul wrote a letter to the LAPD, which is the Los Angeles Police Department, and detailed them to Jessie's complaint. Initially, there was concern over an immigration issue, and the LAPD contacted the United States Immigration Services to determine if Jessie's complaint was true. So originally, they were kind of blowing off the fact that she said that there were boys murdered on this ranch, and the LAPD passed it off to the immigration services. They were basically like, maybe it's this, you know, kind of blowing it off a little bit. Around this time too, there were a lot of scandals going on with the Los Angeles Police Department, and like not good stuff. Like it was really, really, really bad. They were really known for being corrupt, so it makes sense that this happened. On August 31st of 1928, 2 immigration employees, Judson F. Shaw and George W. Scowhorn, went to Northcott's ranch and took Sanford into custody. So they went over to the ranch and they saw Sanford and they ended up taking him. But this is what led up to him being taken. Northcott had saw the cars from the road and ran to the nearby tree line of his property while telling Sanford if he didn't stall the police, he would shoot him from the trees with a rifle. At least I believe it was a rifle or a shotgun, something like that. For the next 2 hours, Sanford stalled for time while Northcott was running. Finally, Sanford, once he felt safe, told the police that Northcott had kidnapped, molested, beaten, and killed 3 young boys with help from his mother and from himself. So Sanford admitted to the immigration employees what was happening at the ranch, who was involved, and that he himself was also involved. So he kind of just like threw himself under the bus a little bit, but it works out to his benefit. Northcott and Sarah fled to British Columbia and subsequently were arrested in Vernon, British Columbia on September 19th of 1928. Due to errors in the extradition paperwork, which basically means like send them back to the United States for court or whatever needed to be done, they were not returned to Los Angeles until November 30th of 1928. While being held in Canada, Sarah Northcott confessed to the murders, including Walter Collins. Before being extradited, she retracted her statement, as did Northcott, who had confessed to killing more than five boys at the Wineville Ranch. They again confessed to the murders and retracted it again when returned to Los Angeles. So they were playing this game of like, oh, I did it, but wait, I didn't. And when people do that in the court system, it makes it really hard to convict them because you don't know if they're being honest. And part of being able to sentence people who have done things like this is that they confess to it and they stick to the confession. So that was not happening here, which just made it 10 times worse for the police and worse for the families of the boys, and just general, not very good. So the sentencing, On February 8th of 1929, the 27-day trial for Northcott had started. So the trial was a total of 27 days long, and it had started February 8th of 29. The judge was George R. Freeman from Riverside, California. When the jury heard he kidnapped, molested, tortured, and murdered the Winslow brothers, aged 12 and 10, and the headless Mexicans, speculated to be Alvin Garcia, they were enraged, and the jury was made up of all men. So there were no females on the jury, and men tend to be really hard in these types of situations. I feel like if it had been the mothers, there would have been more of a sentence for some of these people. It's just moms, not saying dads don't tend to be protective, because they do, but I think moms it tends to pull at the heartstrings a little more, because like that's their son, you know, like that's their baby boy. So that's kind of, you know. So on February 8th of 29, that date is actually wrong. So whatever 27 days is from February 8th. George R. Freeman sentences Northcott to death by hanging, and Sarah Northcott was sentenced to life in prison, spared the death penalty because she was a woman. So she didn't get the death penalty because she was a woman, so that worked out in her favor. Sanford Clark was instrumental in testimonies against Northcott and was sentenced to 2 years in a rehab facility. I couldn't find the name for some reason. If I can, I will put it on the screen. On October 2nd, I keep tripping up over my words. On October 2nd, 1930, Gordon Stewart Northcott was hanged at the San Quentin State Prison, and he was 23. So he was really young when he was killed. But you do bad things, and bad things happen to you. It's kind of how karma works. Sarah was paroled after serving less than 12 years of her life sentence and passed away in 1944. That's pathetic. She should have been in prison until she died. That's kind of the point of a life sentence. This should have never happened. Sanford Clark lived a normal life after his release and was documented to have passed away June 20th of 1991 and was buried in Saskatoon Woodlawn Cemetery on August 26th of 1993. So the aftermath, Wineville, California changed its name to current-day Mira Loma, and the house that Northcott killed at is now part of the Jurupa Valley. This change was made because of the negative press around the murders, but if you go to this specific spot in the Jurupa Valley or Mira Loma, you will actually find street names named Wineville whatever. There's also a park named Wineville whatever, and reminiscent of Wineville, California. So now we're going to talk about the people that were involved with this. This is what I meant in the intro when I said that there was a lot happening with this case, because this is the lot happening with the case. 9-year-old Walter Collins was abducted from his home in Lincoln Heights, California on March 10th of 1928. Initially, his mother, Christine, believed his abduction had something to do with his father, Walter Collins Sr., who was in prison at Folsom State Prison as he had been convicted of 8 armed robberies, and the police also believed it had something to do with Walter's father. Collins' disappearance received national attention, and the Los Angeles police followed up hundreds of leads without success. This caused the LAPD to receive tons of negative press and increased public pressure to find Walter Collins. So not only were there tons of scandals happening, but there were also following a bunch of leads that led to nowhere. And they started to get really heated about the Walter Collins situation. So, yeah. 5 months after his disappearance, a boy in DeKalb, Illinois, claiming to be Walter, was picked up by police. Letters and photographs were exchanged, and the LAPD arranged for the boy to be sent to Los Angeles for a public reunion with Christine. Christine saw the boy and immediately knew that the boy was not Walter, but the police convinced her to try him out. About 3 weeks after Walter had been returned, Christine went to the LAPD once more with dental records of Walter's and dental records of the unknown boy and showed them to the police to prove he was not her son, and a handwriting expert was called in to compare handwriting samples. the samples were not the same. His R's were entirely different. I guess they teach their R's differently on the West Coast than they do here on the East Coast. So his R was not taught in California. So that was like a major telltale sign that this was not Walter. His handwriting was nothing alike. And his dental records, like a lot of the times in like really horrific accidents, forensics teams will use dental records because a lot of the times teeth are still mainly intact, unless something happens and the teeth come out of the mouth. But even then they can kind of piece together the jaw and tell what happened with the teeth, and they're able to identify them that way. Christine was admitted to a psych ward under Code 12, which was for difficult and unruly people to get her out of the chief of police hair. The chief of police was Captain J.J. Jones at the time. So basically, Captain J.J. Jones was sick of Christine, and he was like, I don't want to deal with you. I'm going to put you in a mental hospital instead under Code 12. So that's pretty crappy. But it is what it is. So let's see. Captain J.J. Jones questioned the boy while Christine was in hospital, and he learned that the boy was actually Arthur Hutchins Jr. And he was a runaway from Illinois who was told he looked like Walter, who was missing, and he assumed the identity of Walter Collins to get out of Illinois. So this dude's smart. He's like 10, 11, 12 years old, and he's stealing dead people's identity. Like, a little crafty, you know? Arthur's stepmom came to get him and take him back to Illinois. Christine was released roughly 10 days after his return to Illinois. So it even took 10 days for the chief of police to get her out of the freaking hospital. So that's cool. She then filed a lawsuit against the LAPD on September 30th, 1930. Christine won the case against the LAPD and was awarded $10,000 to be paid by Chief of Police J.J. Jones. She never received her settlement from the lawsuit. The last newspaper account of Christine was from 1941 when she tried to collect $15,562 US against Captain Jones, who was then retired in Superior Court. Sorry, my computer keeps doing something weird. Christine also remained hopeful that Walter was alive after she went to see Northcott for the first time in prison. She asked Northcott if he killed Walter, and after listening to his repeated lies, confessions, recantations, deduced that he was insane, as Northcott didn't even know if he had met Walter, much less killed him, and she clung to the hope that he survived. So basically, Northcott was not able to give any details about Walter, or claimed he didn't have any details about Walter. He didn't remember him. He didn't think he killed him, is essentially what Northcott is trying to say. Northcott didn't even know he had met Walter, much less killed him, so she clung to the hope that he was alive. Northcott sent Christine a telegram shortly before his execution claiming he lied to Christine about killing Walter and promised to tell the truth in person if she came to see him. And when she went to see him, Northcott backed out and said, I don't want to talk to you. She confronted him and he said, I don't know anything about it. I'm innocent. A news account said a distraught woman was outraged yet seemed comforted by his ambiguous replies, and his seeming refusal to remember such details as Walter's clothing and the color of his eyes gave her continued hope that her son still lived. So it's pretty crappy. It's pretty crappy that this dude was doing this to her, because she's already freaked out about the fact that she can't find her kid, and then this dude is lying to her on top of it. So can you imagine, like, as a parent who's just trying to find their missing child, figure out what happened? They're potentially just missing, or they are potentially a murder victim. I'd be a little mad. And I don't know, I commend Christine for the fact that she kept hope, because I don't think in that situation I would. Like, if my kid were missing and they're like 90% sure that he was abducted and murdered, I think, I don't know, I feel like that's really hard to deal with, but at the same time, there has to be a point where you come to accepting the fact that your son is missing or dead, or that he's never coming home. Like, and I understand, like, as a parent's concept, like, that'd be really, really difficult to try to accept, but it's also really crappy that she kept up hope, because that's a terrible way to live your life. It's a terrible way to live your life anyway, that your son was killed, but on top of that, you still think he might potentially be alive. To me, that's just too much, you know? Like, I couldn't. I think I just have to take the fact that he was killed and just try to move on and, you know, do something different. And she couldn't. And that's really unfortunate, because she lived her life in a very sad way. And I feel very sorry for her. Lewis was 12, and we're going to talk about the Nelson brothers now. Lewis was 12, Nelson was 10. Their parents were Nelson Winslow Sr. and Miss Winslow. They did not have a first name for her. The boys were abducted May 16th, 1928 from Pomona, California. On their way home from a yacht club meeting, Northcott was convicted of kidnapping and murdering the boys. Nelson Sr. banded with a lynch mob outside of Northcott's trial, and the police convinced them to disband. So he was going to try to have him lynched at the end of the trial, but before he was sentenced. So he was going to try and do the deed before he was actually sentenced to death. It's so unfortunate. So when I was reading, I came across like how he was able to kidnap the boys. So he was essentially playing like the guise of, hey, your parents were in an accident. They told me to come and get you, like the police did. So I came to get you. And the kids are like, I don't know so much about that. But then they see Sanford sitting there and he's fine, so let's get in the car. That is essentially how they think the abductions were done, and that's pretty crappy to use somebody who's like a similar age as them to entice them. But that's the thing with kids, is like it doesn't take a lot to convince them, like candies, puppies, like all kinds of things. You see that was like the major thing with Ariel Castro, even, is like he convinced 3 different girls to go into his house under the guise of like kittens and puppies, and he kept them captive. If you guys want me to cover Ariel Castro, let me know in the comments. He's a little messed up too. So now we're going to talk about Arthur Hutchins Jr. In 1933, Arthur wrote a book about how and why he impersonated Walter Hutchins. Walter Hutchins' mother had died in 1925 when he was 9 and had been living with his stepmom, Violet. Hutchins pretended to be Walter to get away from Violet. After being on the road for a month, he arrived in DeKalb, Illinois. When he was brought in, he claimed to not be Walter, but later changed his story when he saw a chance to leave Illinois. He died in 1954 at the age of 38 by a blood clot and left behind a wife and daughter. In 2008, his daughter Carol said her father was full of adventure and could do no wrong in her eyes. So this dude did some kind of shady, and there's nothing that's really been released that I've seen about Arthur's home life with Violet. But I can assume, like, if he ran away, it might have not been that good, or he was just petty. Like, it could be a lot of different things. So we're going to talk about now Reverend Gustav Breglib. Breglib was a Presbyterian minister and one of the first radio evangelists, so he's a pretty cool dude in and of himself. He was a pastor at St. Paul's Presbyterian Church on Jefferson Boulevard at 3rd Street Avenue in Los Angeles. If I'm not wrong, that church still stands, actually. He fought to have Christine released from the mental hospital after she was placed there in retaliation from the police, and he died at age 61. And finally, the boy who came forward. In 1935, 5 years after Northcott's execution, a boy and his parents came forward and spoke to the authorities. Several years earlier, the boy had gone missing and was suspected he might have been a victim at Wineville. Because if you remember me saying before that there were potentially up to 20 people. However, Sanford never told the police that a boy had escaped the chicken coop. Maybe it was before Sanford had been there. We don't know. We don't even know if there was actually 20 boys who were killed. So there's that as well. Clark's testimony only indicated that 3 boys had been held in the coop, which were Walter and the Nelson brothers. And how they actually ended up finding the boys was through Sanford's testimony, like his statement. and he was actually instrumental to them finding the bodies. And they didn't even really find bodies, they found fragments of bone and blood and so on and so forth like that. There was never anything found of Walter though, which is also really weird. There were things from the Nelson brothers, like a backpack, a Boy Scouts book, you know, stuff like that, but there was nothing of Walter. So Walter was never really like a confirmed murder for Wineville, which is also unfortunate, because again, it's one of those things where you're just not entirely certain. Like, he could have been alive or he could have been murdered. There was never any evidence saying that Walter was actually there, except for Sanford. But then you have Northcott sitting over here on the side, recanting, confessing, and never vehemently being like, yes, I murdered Walter. Like, he was never straightforward with it. Like, with serial killers, you have like two different types. You have the types that are like, yeah, I did this, and then they'll throw out some extra names too, just to try and get more recognition. And then you have the murderers that'll just try and play mind tricks with you, and that's was Northcott's whole thing, was playing mind tricks with people. We're gonna just talk very briefly about pop culture references. So in 2008, a film called Changeling, who was, I believe, directed by Clint Eastwood. If not, I'll correct it on the screen somewhere. And it starred Angelina Jolie as Christine Collins and John Malkovich. I'm not entirely certain who he played. I want to say he played Gordon. The Big Imposter, episode 104 of the radio series Dragnet. American Horror Story Hotel references the Wineville family, or the Wineville murders. And finally, Body Farm, episode 12 of Investigation Discovery Show Evil Kin. So there's a couple of different things about this that have been in pop culture and have been referenced in pop culture. I can't talk today, I'm so sorry. So yeah, it's pretty interesting case. This was the reason why I didn't want to do makeup while I did it, was because I knew it was going to be really difficult to talk about all these things and make sure I got everything straight. There's a lot involved with this. A lot of these cases are really heavy, and some of them are really hard to look into, either because they're really close to home or it's just the content of what happened in the murder. So there's that. Yeah. So I think that is the end of the video today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, please give me a thumbs up. If you don't, give me a thumbs down and let me know what I can do better next time. Also, subscribe to my channel if you like me. If not, then that's cool. Have a good day. Leave a comment below. Also hit the bell icon. That way you guys are notified every single time that I upload. I try to upload every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I'm hoping to have makeup and murders and makeup, whatever I call it, every Wednesday. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.